If you were the oldest child in a household with emotionally immature or abusive parents, here are some things that you probably did pretty routinely. Whenever there were serious arguments in the house, whether they were verbal and like psychologically abusive or whether there was property damage or even physical altercations, you probably took care of your younger sibling. Probably shielded them, distracted them, took them into another room, took them outside, did anything you could to shield them from what was happening, because even as a child, you recognized that this was distressing and nobody was really looking out for them. And so you took that on as the adult caregiver should and took that on as your responsibility. Probably engaged in caretaking of one or both of your parents. If you lived in a two-parent household, you might have provided them emotional support. You might have acted as like the marriage therapist between, parents if they were married. You probably comforted and soothed and provided emotional regulation to your parent rather than them being in the place to provide that to the children. Probably tiptoed around the house or walked on eggshells so as to not further agitate your emotionally immature parent, to stay out of the line of fire of your emotionally immature parent, or make sure that your siblings didn't catch the brunt of whatever mood they were in. You might have felt emboldened at times to say things like, "Can you just be nice? If you would have asked me this way, I would have responded." Like, kind of ultimately teaching emotional intelligence to parents who really ought to have known that and been teaching it to you as the child, but you, for whatever reason, had that skill and ability even when they didn't, and then engaged in like teaching of it to them. You did everything possible to not be in the house. Maybe you were involved in a ton of extracurricular activities at, a job or something outside of the home, or made excuses to be at other people's houses, whether it was friends or people that you knew at school, or maybe you just kind of like left the house and didn't come back until it was time for bed because you really disliked being in the household and couldn't tolerate being in that toxic environment for long periods of time, and knew that it was better for you to kind of find alternate ways to spend your time. Maybe you found other family members like grandparents that kind of took you in, and their house was sort of like your second house. Maybe at every opportunity you asked to like sleep over or stay there for the weekend because that's where you actually got some real caretaking. Maybe they brushed your hair, or maybe they fed you meals that you like, or maybe they took you places and played with you and paid attention to you and asked you questions and gave you that attention that you were really craving as a child. You probably took on responsibilities that most kids your age did not have, whether that was emotional, psychological, logistical, or physical responsibilities. Maybe you were tasked with doing the majority of the household cleaning, caretaking of siblings. Maybe you were the one that made sure people got where they needed to go. Maybe you took care of parents who were like intoxicated or under the influence and couldn't care for themselves. But you really had a high level of responsibility in the household, emotionally also, not just logistically or physically. Ultimately, you probably did not have a lot of time to just be a kid and spent the majority of your time being hypervigilant in the environment and taking care of everybody's needs but your own.